laying the main here, and thank you for coming back after the Tazeri incident. If you're one of the few people that did watch the last Tazeri deck tech while it was still up, I apologize. I thought the card worked differently than what I thought, and I had a few people point that out in the 5 minutes that the video was up. I thought Tazeri made the spells cost less. I did not know how to read. So, to try to redeem myself from that trash fire that was a deck, this is my new deck that I've been working on here, and it's Aurelia the Warleader. Now, Aurelia came out years ago, but let's just give it a read here. It's 2, red, red, white, white, 3/4 angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever Aurelia the Warleader attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So, since this commander was out, it's in probably one of the weaker colors, if not the weakest color in Commander. I think Aurelia has gotten some new toys from Zendikar Rising, and let's get into that. The first one being Angel of Destiny. Angel of Destiny is a new card that I think really works in this deck because the extra combats. This is actually the whole reason why Aurelia was picked. Angel of Destiny deck started before the Aurelia. I wanted to build a deck around Angel of Destiny, and it kind of just worked around that very well. Because with Angel of Destiny, we'll go ahead and read it. It's 3 double white, flying first strike, 2/6 angel, cleric. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each gain that much life. At the beginning of your end step, if you have at least 15 more than your starting life total, each player Angel of Destiny attacked this turn loses the game. So Angel of Destiny does not have to hit the person. All it has to do is attack and you be above the 15. So then with Aurelia, we're trying to get those multiple attacks, so if we're just accidentally above that life total or with the double strike and the extra combats with Aurelia attacking as well, that we can get above that 15 starting life total, which is 55 in Commander. The supporting cast to go with Angel of Destiny, we have Archangel Avacyn, Avacyn Angel of Hope. Both these cards, big, powerful angels. We have Cavernous Souls in our land base. Like I tell everyone, and like I say at the end, your mana base is up to you. If you have a budget, if you want to go all out, I have mine going all out, but it's totally up to you. But I think both these Avacyns go extremely well in this type of shell. The next we have is Balefire Liege, Burnished Heart, and Combat Celebrant. Balefire Liege is a later inclusion, which has been incredible. Balefire Liege being able to double pump our Aurelia, pump all of our other creatures except the next Burnished Heart, but Burnished Heart is just our ramp since Boros is lacking. The Combat Celebrant, just to give another Aurelia. Just something that we can do to exert, and I guess it goes semi-infinite. It's not my cup of tea, so you exert the Combat Celebrant with Aurelia, you untap it, and then you can continue to basically have unlimited combats, but usually they have blockers, usually they have ways to combat that, but if I guess you do have Boros Charm, then there you go. So I think these three very well mainstay of the deck. Next three we have is Dockside Extortionist, Aurelia the Primal Surge, and Frontline Medic. Dockside Extortionist, I think is just a staple in every kind of red deck. With such high mana like this, I think Dockside's a little better because we have ways to dump into that. Aurelia Primal Storm. Sure, I was really on the fence about it at the beginning, but now I think it's fantastic with double untap, or with the extra combat. Having to take those cards for free, I think Aurelia is one of the fun cards that are really good in this deck. Frontline Medic, I think, is one of the few cuts in this deck that I would make if there is something better. I would try out one of the newer cards if you do not have a Frontline Medic, but being able to give that indestructible to the team if you do have 2 other creatures, hopefully one of those being Aurelia. I don't think the sacrifice really comes in handy with Frontline Medic. I think just the indestructible, but I do think there could be better cards to have than Frontline Medic. The next three we have Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight, Godo, Bandit Warlord, and Iroas, God of Victory. Gisela, if there is a staple card, if there was a card that I would say that is irreplaceable in this deck, it is Gisela, Blade of Gold Knight. That card with any type of double strike, with True Conviction, with any other cards, let's say Soulbound, with a Silverblade Paladin, I think Gisela is basically one of the best cards, if not the best non-commander card, because it works so well with Aurelia, working together to give that semi-double strike, and it's almost a political card as well, kind of like how Edric is to have incentive to attack other players and not you. Gisela has saved me multiple times from damage, as well as being able to pump that damage into my opponents. Godo, Bandit Warlord, I think having Godo there just as a infinite win con to have with the Helm of the Host, but also just having that second combat to untap itself is okay, but I think having the infinite combo is kind of what Godo is there for, and since it does a semi extra combat with itself. Iroas, Iroas has been incredible. Iroas, I think, is an underrated god that you usually don't see, being able to give creatures menace and prevent all damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. Because of that, I ran into a Solemn Simulacrum problem that when I had Iroas and Solemn out, I could not attack to trade. I used it as a block. So that's not the reason I took out Solemn. I just, in this deck, I just didn't like it. If you want to replace Frontline Medic with Solemn, I think that's a pretty good trade out. That's not my cup of tea. But having Iroas out for the Menace with Aurelia is just extremely good in that being able to attack through combat and not worry about them getting blown out of combat. And with that indestructible, it's pretty safe. And most people don't in this deck want to get rid of Iroas with a Path or a Swords, or even if it's activated. But with Aurelia having 4 pips, Iroas having 2, adding to that devotion, Iroas is usually online. The next 3 is Knight of the White Orchid, Lyra Dawnbringer, and Mangar the Diplomat. Knight of the White Orchid with this deck is a ramp spell, usually a blocker, but more than likely it's just a ramp spell in this type of deck. The first strike sometimes matters, but usually not, and I'll say why that first strike matters here in a few minutes. With Lyra Dawnbringer, giving Aurelia lifelink, giving other angels lifelink, just a big thing itself. I think that's what we want to have for extra combats. Pumping Gisela, it's just all around a good card in this type of deck, even if it wasn't angels, but just having a flyer. I think Lyra is probably one of the key cards of the deck with the underlying angel theme. Mangara the Diplomat drew me so many cards in a game the other day that it was ridiculous. Not the attacking part, but most opponents and most people cast 2 cards in 1 turn, because once you have your mana rocks and everything out, that's just kind of what Commander is. So having that white card draw, having that lifelink, which I'm telling you, that is key. It may not happen a lot, but having that lifelink is a big deal. The next 3 cards is Morag, the Fury of Akum, the Mother of Ruins, Odric, Luniarch, Marshall. Morag has been probably the best new card out of Zendikar Rising I have played with. All the other cards have been pretty good. They've been alright, but Morag is basically the key card to go with Aurelia because it just takes the extra combats. That's exactly what we want that card to do. I usually don't have off-color fetches in decks. I think that's not what Commander is supposed to be in my eyes. And that's interpreted to everyone else. I really don't care if you play off-color fetches to help your deck, especially, I guess, in Boros. But with Morag being able to play that fetch in your second main, be able to have to fetch in your second main as well after Morag, having 2 extra combats. Since it's a new card, I'm going to go ahead and read it and why that sequencing has to be that way. It's 4 and a double red. Each attacking creature you control gets 1+0 for each time it attacked this turn. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. So, when you play a land in your second main phase, so if you did it before in your first main phase, you do not get your second main phase, as I believe. That could be not true, but that's what I've been told, and that's what I've been going off of. Because I believe if you play the fetch land in your second main, it triggers because it's your main phase. Then another land comes into play from the fetch. Then you will get the 2 extra combats after that second main phase. Which, having Aurelia out, Aurelia gives you 2 combats, Morag will give you 2 more combats, pumping your Aurelia for each combat. Usually I like playing Morag in the first main phase and not doing the landfall till the second, to be able to pump Aurelia during those combats without even Morag being activated yet. Mother of Runes, of course, just there to protect. It can protect itself, it can protect the commander, it can protect everything. I think that with this, having so many big beefs, big angels, big creatures, Mother of Ruins is kind of just a mainstay in these decks. Odric, Luniarch Marshall. This is just me. This is my fun card. I believe Luniarch Marshall is just a card that I've always found fascinating. In this deck, it just works. Being able to give the Mangara lifelink to other creatures, being able to give first strike, flying to some creatures that don't have flying. It works really well with the Assemble Legion that we have. Being able to give other creatures haste, being able to give other creatures, let's say, give the tokens flying. It's just an accidental, really good card in this deck because so many other creatures have accidental abilities. Giving creatures vigilance from Aurelia, giving the creatures haste that Aurelia gave. So just playing Aurelia with Odric out gives all your other creatures haste. I'm going to go ahead and read Odric because I just don't think a lot of people knows what it does. So you can read it here. It's 3 and a white. Legendary Human Soldier is 3/3. At the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. If a creature you control has first strike, the same is true for Flying, Death Touch, Double Strike, Haste, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Skulk, Trample, and Vigilance. So Indestructible be coming from Iroas. We have Menace, we have Lifelink, we have Indestructible, we have Hexproof. I think we have Hexproof or with the booties. Haste, Double Strike, and Flying are probably the main ones that we're going to get. Odric is just my fun card. If you want to replace it, I think that's fine. I think Odric just works better than what most people think. And usually it doesn't eat a removal spell because people aren't threatened by it. The next group of 3 we have is Scourge of the Throne, Seer Ascendant, and Silverblade Paladin. Scourge of the Throne being able to give you an extra combat with that dethrone mechanic if you, of course, attack the person with the highest life total or tied for the highest life total, but that doesn't mean for those extra combats. So the first combat you have, let's say with Scourge and Aurelia, you have to tank the person with the highest life total first, but then the 2 extra combats you have, you do not have to with Scourge because the combats have already been stacked that you have after. So you can get it pumped if you keep attacking that person with the highest life total, but I think with this reprint and mystery boosters, Scourges are a little easier to get a hold of, so I think this is probably... most of the mainstay cards in this deck are the ones that, of course, that give you extra combats, because you'll be surprised on how often Aurelia deals in commander damage, and killing people with commander damage. Next is Seer Ascendant. Boring card for me. Of course, it gives lifelink if we have Odric out, but we're never going to just have Odric out the whole time. Seer's Ascendant, I think, is just a big thing to attack with Aurelia, having a 1-drop 6/6 lifelink flyer on turn 1. Boring to me. If you replace it, I think that's the only one I would replace, but you can't still say that it is not a powerful card. Silverblade Paladin is a brick house. It's probably just one of my fun cards, but Silverblade on 3, attaching with Aurelia, attaching with Gisela, because of course Gisela does not say double strike. It gives a specific wording that is not double strike. So Silverblade Paladin with any of these big threats is pretty great. And of course, like I said, Silverblade Paladin is not really that threatening, and of course until it is with Aurelia. So I really like Silverblade Paladin. I've always liked that card, especially in the standard at that time. So I think Silverblade Paladin, another pretty cheap card to also have for this deck as well. The last 3 creatures we have are Stoneforge Mystic, I will say Stone Giant because I can't say the word after Stone, and Sun Titan. I'm pretty happy that the Stoneforge Mystic and the Giant are next to each other because they kind of work hand in hand. This deck has a very light equipment-based theme. I really like that. I think a lot of people, including myself, and through the Mana Rock podcast, my other co-host, Oni, sometimes equipments can just be a little boring if they're equipment-based, but I think in this deck they really work out. The Mystic, of course, being able to go tutor up that equipment, and the Giant be able to just attack it. I'm going to go ahead and read the Giant because I feel like it's another card that's not really played, and also came out in Doubles Master, so I think this is a good time to pick up that card. It's 3 white, a Giant Warrior for a 4/4 Vigilance, a 1 and a white and tap to equip. Search your library for an equipment card, put that on the battlefield, and attach it to a creature you control. When we talked about the equipments here in a second, you'll see why that Giant is so good. Sun Titan, of course, I think it may be a cut. I just don't like Sun Titan, but there are a bunch of different rocks. If they get destroyed, there is a bunch of different enchantments that get destroyed. There's a few creatures. I think Sun Titan is one of those cards that I think you have to play in these types of decks just in case something happens, as well as if you have to go get a land, if you want to go get a fetch land. Of course, Giant being one of those cards that I think is just kind of an include. It's pretty cheap. It's been reprinted a ton of times, so put it in if you want to. If not, I can see it being replaced. Next, we have the Instants. First 3 instants we have are Boros Charm, Enlightened Tutor, and Generous Gift. I'm pretty sure Boros Charm is just the best Boros card ever printed, and it's pretty hard to beat it because it's just so versatile, especially in this game. You can give your permanents indestructible. You can give one of your creatures double strike. In this deck, that's huge. And never dome someone really for 4. I've had decks do that before where it could copy the instant, but I think that card in this deck is just incredible, of course. Enlightened Tutor in this deck being able to get so many cards, I think that's one of those cards that I do think is a staple, and I know it's hard to get a hold of at times with a kind of higher price point, but Enlightened Tutor is just so good in this deck. Same with Generous Gift. Sometimes there's pesky lands, sometimes there's planeswalkers, sometimes there's enchantments, there's a lot of stuff, and I think Generous Gift is just one of those cards, especially with having Sunforger. I think Generous Gift is just incredible. That elephant really doesn't matter, and it's on the ground, and I think usually this deck has so many ways to protect yourself from that elephant. Yeah, I really think this card's incredible. The next 3 we have is Path to Exile, Savage Beating, and Swords to Plowshare. I'm going to kind of basically combo Path to Exile and Swords. You know what they do. You know how great they are. They're basically auto-includes in white decks, even just not Boros. Yeah, it's pretty simple just to why those cards are included. Savage Beating, though, I'm going to go ahead and read because I don't think this is a really common card. It's 3 double red instant. Play Savage Beating only during your turn and only during combat. You can choose one. Creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn, or untap all creatures you control, and after this phase there's an additional combat step. The spell also has Entwine. If you don't know what Entwine is, it's basically almost like a kicker. So you can pay 2 more, which is a 1 and a red, to get both of those. So you get double strike and additional combat at instant speed. So I think Savage Beating is just an upper tier extra combat spell, especially with this Aurelia deck, since that's all we're basically doing. Still, we have a lot of kills with all these extra combats. It doesn't take that many creatures that are that big having that many combats to kill someone. So I think Savage Beating is probably getting a little up there in price. I'm sure it's going to go up, but I hope we have a reprint somewhere in the future. The last instant we have is Wear and Tear. It's Wear and Tear. I think this card is great. I like the other cards. The one, Return to Dust, and then the one from one of the Ravnica standard sets, it's escaping my mind. The one that can exile, but I really like having Wear and Tear at that cheap cost. I know there's Disenchant, but I like being able to do both. Of course, this has Fuse, so you can pay 3 to get both. I really don't think this needs much of an explanation, so we're just going to go on to the sorceries. Sorceries, we have Austere Command, Blasphemous Act, and Relentless Assault. Austere Command being able to basically be a pick board wipe or a pick removal spell for enchantments, creatures, artifacts. Yeah, this card's great. I think everybody knows that. This is the time to pick them up in Doubles Masters. Blasphemous Act. Yep, another boring removal spell or board wipe. So, but you have to play them, of course. So I'm not complaining about that. But this card is, of course, really good. Relentless Assault basically being that staple extra combat spell. 2 and double red, untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat followed by an additional main phase. You only get to untap the creatures that attack, which is fine. It really doesn't matter. This card's great at 4 mana, and being super cheap, under $5, you can find this card a lot of places, so being able to play Relentless Assault is pretty great. The last sorceries we're going to talk about are Vandal Blast, Waves of Aggression, Wheel of Fortune, and Wrath of God. Really don't think we have to go into much detail about Vandal Blast and Wrath of God, but I do want to talk about the other two. Waves of Aggression being that 5 mana extra combat spell, just like a Relentless Assault, but for 1 mana more, plus that hybrid mana. But the big part of it is Retrace. Being able to, if you have a land in your hand late game with Waves of Aggression, you can discard that card and cast it, but you still have to pay the cost of Waves of Aggression. But being able to have that constant buyback with Waves of Aggression, with that card still in your graveyard, having the land in your hand, I think Waves is pretty great, and it's kind of a weirder card to get, but I think in this deck it's pretty good. If you have a World at War or other ones like that, you just can't get a Waves of Aggression, I think that's fine, but I think Waves of Aggression is probably the most powerful one in that slot. Wheel of Fortune, I know a lot of people don't have a Wheel of Fortune, and I think that's fine. If you don't have one, I would play the Miracle one that is escaping my mind right now, because I know Wheel of Fortune is freaking expensive. Is it needed in this deck? Not really. It just draws cards, but I think playing Reforges the Soul, there we go, I'm a smart cookie. I think if you play that, that's fine, but if you have a Reforges the Soul, I think it's very good in this deck. Especially with you playing Smothering Tithe, you get to make all those treasures, but also if you run out of gas to draw cards, I think Wheel of Fortune is great, but also if you can't get it, of course Reforge the Soul is as well. Alright, moving on to enchantments. We have the first 3 are Aggravated Assault, Assembled Legion, and Authority of the Councils. Aggravated Assault being a 3 mana enchantment that we can pay 5 and at sorcery speed have the extra combats. Pump in that and get to take extra combats after that. With Aggravated Assault and sort of Feast and Famine, it is just incredible, of course. Assembled Legion is one of my cutesy cards that I just love. Being able to accidentally just put out tons of tokens. You don't care to throw them away in combat. With Marag, they're getting huge. Being able to go wider or block with True Conviction because of being able to pump those Assembled Legion tokens. I just think Assembled Legion's good, and I think it's very looked over in these types of decks. Because a lot of them, like Feather and Firesong and Sunspeaker, you just don't really want those type of cards. Maybe in Firesong, but I really don't think so. Now that I think about it, yeah, probably in Firesong. But the other Boros decks, not really. I think Assembled Legion is just overlooked a lot, and I just love this card. So, kind of a pet card. Authority of the Councils. That and the next card, which is Blind Obedience, spoiler alert, I think are to slow down other decks. I play it just because we have a really high mana curve. Where Boros, we don't really get the ramp. We have really high mana, with our commander just being 6 mana, which is so much. I think being able to have that Authority of the Councils and Blind Obedience to kind of slow down the game really helps in it. That incremental life gain just in case of Angel, and to help us out with very aggressive decks really works out well. Spoiler alert, I already talked about Blind Obedience. Blind Obedience is basically the same as Authority of the Councils, but also works with artifacts, and having that great extort mechanic is fantastic. The next that we're going to talk about is Duelist Heritage and Fervor. Duelist Heritage is another card, kind of like Boros Charm, but at least Duelist Heritage is on the field that we kind of get to politic with. Being able to basically say, hey, if you attack this person, you get something. Same with Gisela, but with Duelist Heritage only being able to give double strike to one of their creatures, but you're not the one really doing it, so you can play defense, but also if you attack with one of your creatures. The other day I was able to have Odric and Duelist Heritage out to stack, so I give all my creatures the double strike off Odric. This card's I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I really think it's good because being able to have it out for 3 mana, give Aurelia double strike, there's tons of other creatures. Having that ability to give your opponent's creatures double strike or that one creature so they don't attack you. Because if they attack someone else, I think it is great. Yeah, you never give them if you attack you, of course. But hey, who knows? There's crazy situations out there. The next 4 I'm going to talk about, the last 4 enchantments, are Fervor, Land Tax, Smothering Tithe, and True Conviction. Fervor, I really didn't think we needed because Aurelia had haste, but after Aurelia, we want to play some beaters after that are high mana cost, and we have to have them have haste. Atali not having haste is something that just waiting that turn, be able to not have these things that can attack immediately, same with Mirag. Fervor is great. I really usually don't like Fervor in red-based decks, or decks in general. I know, please don't hate me, I already said it about Solemn, but Fervor really works in this deck. Land Tax as well. Land Tax is something that works well, just being able to get those lands. With Waves of Aggression, you can fuel the Waves of Aggression. Super good, everybody knows Land Tax is very good. Smothering Tithe, we need mana. This is a sort of ramp for us. We have really high curve. Smothering Tithe being able to incrementally get those treasures. Everyone knows this card's incredible. We don't really need to talk about that. True Conviction is something I see myself getting with Enlightened Tutor a lot. True Conviction being able to give the lifelink, the double strike, making Aurelia a Vigilance, Haste, Flying, double strike lifelinker with all the tokens that we get from a symbol. We play 24 creatures, which I think is a great amount. I think True Conviction is just fantastic. I really do. Could be wrong about this card because it is 6 mana, but yeah, I really don't think I'm wrong about this card. I think this card is hot, especially with Gisela. Play True Conviction. It is cheap. Try it out. I love it. The last section of cards to go over is the artifacts. The first 3 being Arcane Signet, Blackblade Reforged, and Boros Signet. Arcane Signet and Boros Signet, of course, being our forms of ramp in this deck. We have to have them. There's not really talk about. Blackblade Reforged, though, that card's bonkers. With Aurelia being 6 mana, if you can equip it after, or if you can equip it to her before, just whenever. Like, if you can play Aurelia and equip it, you'll have 6 lands. It's cheaper to equip with legendaries. We play a good amount of legendaries. This card was a later edition. It's a great edition. Play Blackblade Reforged. It's cheap as well, so you have no excuse, unless you hate Blackblade, then whatever. The next 3 equipment are Helm of the Host, Lightning Greaves, and Lithoform Engine. Helm of the Host being with Godo, but also goes with Aurelia, also goes with all the other creatures we have, basically. Yeah, Helm of the Host is great. I think it's going to creep up there. It's creeping up in price. It's going to go up and up and up, so I'll probably get them sooner than later. Lightning Greaves sometimes screws me over. We can't give Aurelia other equipments, but that's fine because hopefully we do have another creature to attach it to. Lithoform Engine is a new card. I've tried it out. I think it's pretty great. I think it's either going to go in a lot of decks or little decks because it's one of those things that is so versatile that it can be activated in any deck. So having that Lithoform Engine to copy the Aurelia trigger, to copy tons of triggers, to copy a fetch land to give us that extra form of ramp, to copy a Swords to Plowshare, to copy another Dockside Extortionist. No, I think this card's busted. I think this card's going to be overlooked. Even though it is rising in price, I think people are kind of figuring it out. But please play Lithoform Engine and try it in other decks. The next 3 we have is Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, and Shadow Spear. The first 2 are boring and expensive. If you don't have them, of course don't play them. There's other mana rocks, but these are the best 2. Shadow Spear, incredible. Just being able to give Aurelia that trample with that lifelink, with that little boost, just a little bit. But having that ability that we can activate against other people that have Avacyn, other gods, little combat tricks, is pretty good. And usually we get it out with the giant that can search it and put it in. But I think it's also cheap enough just to play since it's only 1 mana. I think that card's great. What else is there left to say? The next 3 are Soul Ring, Sun Forger, Swiftfoot Boots. Soul Ring and Swiftfoot Boots, boring. We already know they're good. The Sunforger being one of the best equipments in Boros, if not the best Boros equipment. I think it's easy to say it's one of the best Boros cards as well. Here's the problem I have within this deck. I probably need to add more targets that I can get, but I think right now Sunforger, of course, is incredible. And it does pump Aurelia, which we do like. The last 4 cards we're really going to talk about is Sword of Feast and Famine, Sword of Amethyst, Talisman of Conviction, and Thran Dynamo. Talisman of Conviction, Thran Dynamo, boring, chuck them out, they're good, you know. Sword of Feast and Famine and Sword of the Amethyst. Sword of Feast and Famine is great in this deck, with additional combats to make them discard cards, if you have anything to dump your mana into. Yeah, Sword of the Amethyst is great. Sword of Feast and Famine is great. Now, the sword doesn't work with Morag the way I initially thought it did, to basically give the additional combats forever for how many basic lands we have. But since Morag does say that main phase key in the landfall, but I still think it's great. It's a small form of ramp. It's only 2 mana to equip and to cost. I think Sword of Feast and Famine, of course, is the better one. I know it's the more expensive and harder one to get, but it was in Double Masters, and I would try to work to get one for this deck if you can. If not, that's fine. I'm sure there's other swords you can put in here, or other equipments, but I think this is the best one since it untaps your mana each time you hit with, of course, with Double Strike, or for those additional combats. But no, that's really it. I think this deck really came together. I know I built around Angel of Hope, and the rest of the deck just works. This deck does compete very well. I hope to win and beat someone with Angel of Destiny someday, fingers crossed. I think this deck is super fun. I know it's in Boros colors, which a lot of people don't play, but I think giving this deck a try, you'll be very surprised like I did with myself. There are a few cuts that you can make to add either cards that you like over mine, or of ones that you don't have. I want these videos to also be a deck tech, but also be a basis for you to branch out and build your own Aurelia deck. Let me know how you build yours. Do you like the new cards? Do you not? What cards do you get off Sunforger? What works better for you? Please let me know in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter, @LaneTheMain. You can listen to my podcast that I do with a friend of mine, Oni, called the Mana Rock Podcast, where, of course, we talk about EDH. In one of the previous episodes, we did go into length about this deck. I've updated since then. I will continue to update this deck. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you again in the future.